The first thing I'm planning to upgrade here is the wheels. And the number one reason is not how they look. I think they actually look kind of cool. They're fun to get around on the property here. But these are actually ATV wheels. A little 12-inch rim with some balloon tires. And the tires are the real problem, as in they have no sidewall strength at all, and they are rounded like a motorcycle tire. So with this already kind of top heavy, not so good balanced deck van here, when you're driving around, it's kind of wobbling, especially when you turn. Especially with my heavy ass in the driver's seat, this side really sinks when we're turning that direction. So even though these are pretty fun to drive around on, and it does help with the gear ratio being a tall tire, they are actually not too pleasant to drive. So I'm going to be swapping to these JDM wheels that I ordered from Japan many years ago that were on my RX-7. Bing! And if you're into old school, late 80s, early 90s JDM wheels like I am, and these are some of the more rare, probably more sought after, and these are some of the more rare 3-spoke kind of wheels. They are 2-piece. These are not just for show. They are, for me, one of the holy grails as far as the 3-spoke JDM wheel selections go. So when I sold that RX-7, I kept the wheels because I knew that I could always get another RX-7, but I would never in my life find another set of these wheels. And now I still have them, even though they are not the correct wheel pattern. These are 114x3. These and the van here is 110, 4x110 millimeter. But so is the RX-7. So I still have the same 4x110 to 4x114 adapters. So now I'm just literally going to take the adapter, wheel, and tire combo that was on that RX-7 and throw them onto this Daihatsu Hi-Jet. And the jack didn't go high enough, so I'm going to have to put something underneath the jack to get enough height. Boom. Got the trusty electric impact here. A whole lot less annoying to use of a compressor that's constantly kicking on in the background. So I've been using the electric style here recently, and I enjoy it much better. All the same power, or more power really, without all the noise. Easy go. There we go. Tiny little brakes, tiny little springs. See if we can't do something about that in the future. Now here, the magic adapter that allows us to go from 4x110, strange, rare pattern, to this 4x114, more common pattern. I'm just going to do these by hand because I'd rather have everything set proper and take a little bit more time than have these set off to the side some, as they are lug-centric, not hub-centric, meaning the hub bore does not rest perfectly on the hub bore of the brakes or of the axle, really, to keep the wheel centered. They are centered by the nuts centering themselves on the lugs. Very important distinction between the two, which means if you don't snug these up in the proper direction or in the proper tightening specifications, the wheel adapter will sit off-centric, not centered, and you will have a wheel that is wobbling absolutely everywhere. So we'll just get these centered by hand and forego the electric power tools. now that they are centered, I can just ever so slightly give them a little bit of a snugging down of this impact. And on 4-lug, you go with the cross pattern, up and down, right to left. There we go. These fancy lug nuts were already on this when I bought it, so we're just going to reuse them for now. Not really my style, but they work. Now we will lower it down and finish the tightening when the wheel is on the floor. There we go. So this is the first real sneak peek of how it's going to look, but they are sitting a little goofy from when you raise it up on the jack stands, the wheels camber in. So when you put down, they kind of bend out, looking a little goofy. So I'm just going to roll it forward and back so I can at least get an idea of how it's going to look. And I will say that it's not bad, but the much shorter tire leaves this giant gap. I'm not a big fan of this giant gap, but what I do like is the ride height itself is now much lower, and it did feel awkwardly goofy to drive around with the ride height of these taller, bouncier tires, but we still have to put on the rear, which should lower it more, and maybe the ride height will sit a little bit better from there. I do kind of have a connection for some suspension upgrades, and I do have some ideas of what I can do myself to lower the ride height on this guy here, as it's not so easy just to find parts for these, so I'm not just going to be able to order a set of coilovers. So now I'm just going to go through, throw the rest of the wheels on, and give it a little test drive and see how it looks. And just to show you a little reference here, look at the tire height difference between the old ones and the new ones. That's pretty significant. 4 or 5 inches there of tire diameter, where this sidewall is that much stiffer. And this sidewall, I can literally just press in with my thumb, even though it's completely filled up. So also you could see the difference here of a regular car tire being flat and how these are rounded out like a motorcycle. So you're not really having much contact patch. So when you're driving around, you're rolling around on the edges and it's wobbling, and the sidewall is not meant, even though these things aren't heavy, it's still coming off of a four-wheeler, made for a lot of bounce and squish and roll with a very soft suspension. Whereas this thing is going to be applying a way too much weight on the sidewall, squishing them around. And I used to hear the sidewall collapsing while I was driving around on the road. So I'll be happy to see, or I'm excited to see, if there's any good noticeable drivability difference. Also, I'm not really sure of the performance of these tires traveling 40 plus miles per hour for 20, 30 minutes at a time. Do they get hot? Do they heat up? Is that bad? I have no idea, but I never was too confident in taking the van for a long drive because of that. And another reason I was wanting to swap these wheels out is the rear wheels were much wider and slightly taller. So on a side note from what I was about to say, the difference in front and rear tire height is not a problem in most cars. But if you have four-wheel drive, you have a rear drive ratio and a front drive ratio, and they need to be the same, or else they start turning at different speeds, which can be a problem for the differential gearing as well as the transfer case. So that can be a problem when the tire height is the final decider of the final drive ratio. So I needed to put tires that are all for the same diameter. So although also I didn't like the width difference, to me it looked a little bit goofy on something that's four-wheel drive where I want four size same tires. Anyway, you can see here that it is rubbing on this side occasionally, and I would notice that when I was driving it, I think it was because of my weight, I would turn a direction which would lean the van in this direction. The soft sidewall plus my body weight on this side would have the tire rub against this bump stop here, and that was definitely not a good thing. Finishing up the last wheel here, and I have to throw a little bit of air in them, and then we'll have a little look-see. How's it look? I'm thinking it's going to be sitting a little too high. And I'll show you a front to back view. Because of these spacers, they are sitting a little bit out from the fender wall, which is not my style. I don't like the wheels to poke out. I'm more of a flush fit kind of person myself. But it might be doable. It maybe won't look terrible. But I was contemplating fabricating myself some sort of fender flare. The only problem is this van door comes back this way. So I'm not really sure how I can get a fender flare to work on this setup without ruining the use of the van door, which would be completely ridiculous to have a van and can't open the doors. So I haven't really given it much thought just yet, but we are going to get to see how this thing looks in just a moment. And it would help if I pressed the forward button and not the reverse button. Look at this, professional here. Almost like I know what I'm doing. Again, just a light tap on this. And then when I put it on the floor, I will torque it up properly. And this is the first look. They still have to settle in as the suspension hasn't fully settled and have the e-brake on. So now we're going to take our first test drive and see how they feel. Initial reaction. I mean, the wheels are cool. I just don't know if I like it better than the original set that I had on here. As far as drivability, I almost got stuck a couple times coming up my dirt driveway. So I noticed a huge traction issue if I'm going to be driving around in any sort of dirt, loose gravel, where these have zero traction there. And obviously the four-wheeler tires are made for it. But driving on the blacktop, at first was not a fan because everything just felt so hard, and I'm just so used to driving on those balloon tires that when I got on these much stiffer Federal Forza tires or Formosa, when I got on these Federal stiff wall tires, everything just felt so stiff and I could feel every little bump, which is what I used to be used to until I've been driving this thing around. But for right now, I'm going to keep it. I really hate this giant gap here, so I'm going to have to come up with something to take care of that. Maybe I'll lower it. Maybe I'll come up with some kind of flare. We'll see in future videos. I'm not really even sure if I'm going to keep these, but I had them. I threw them on. The drivability was much better as far as straight line, taking turns. It was much smoother, no wobble. Didn't feel like a death trap. So for now, I'm going to keep them. And depending on the route that I take with this, so if I turn it into some kind of off-road rig, I'm going to obviously swap these out. Or if I build it into a traditional JDM bazooka type car, then these will probably stay.